What is dead may never die. These are the words spoke by the men of the Iron Islands, traditionally a reaver-based community, famous for its power at sea and their tenacious behaviour towards outsiders. The Iron Islands were originally colonised by the first men thousands of years ago. The state is split up into 7 islands: Pike, Saltcliffe, Greatwick, Oldwick, Blacktide, Orkmont and Harclaw. The Iron Islands have always been a cruel place to live, with infertile lands and violent seas battering the islands and anything that ventures too far out into the sea. The island of Pike is the seat of House Greyjoy, which resides a fortress named Pike, made up of towers built upon 7 natural rock columns. In the years of the first men, the Iron Islands were each run by their own king, one for the land and one for the sea, and a High King to rule them all, until Euron Redhand slaughtered the High King and started his own dynasty of Grey Iron. But when the Andals came and invaded, they swept over the Iron Islands. House Hoare took control. During the period under Hoare, the Ironborn flourished. They invaded and took control of the Riverlands and Bear Island. Their lands stretched from the Iron Islands to the Trident. In the Ironborn's height of power, around 2 years before Aegon Targaryen's landing, a huge castle named Harrenhal was constructed in the Riverlands. Thousands of captives from the Riverlands were forced into labour to construct this giant fortress. Weirwood trees that had stood since the first men were cut down for rafters. The fortress was a true testament to the Iron Islands' dominion over the Riverlands that stood in its shadow. Winters were said to pass, leaving the castle unscathed. Upon its completion, Harren the Black boasted that his new fortress was impenetrable. Within a short time of its completion, Aegon and his sisters and their 3 dragons had begun to conquer Westeros. Whilst the other lords gathered their armies to confront Aegon, Harren and his family hid in their mighty fortress. When Aegon arrived at Harrenhal, he rode his dragon above the forbidding walls and burnt the fortress to the ground, including Harren the Black and all his heirs. With Harren and his heirs dead, the Tullys took control of the Riverlands and served the Targaryens. With the Ironborn being condemned back to their islands, they elected House Greyjoy as the protector of the Iron Islands, where their line still rules to this day, with the words, "We do not sow." Traditionally, the Ironborn worship the Drowned God. The Drowned God is a deity, and it supports the Ironborn's belief that the Drowned God makes them reave and raid. When Aegon took control of Westeros, he refused to allow the Ironborn to continue their ways. A popular expression used by the Ironborn is paying the iron price. This refers to the old way of taking possessions in battle rather than buying them. Throughout the Targaryens' rule, the Iron Islanders kept to their shores, but kept parts of their heritage, whilst causing few problems for the rest of Westeros. That all changed when Robert Baratheon took the Iron Throne. During the War of the Usurper, the Iron Islands had remained neutral. For this reason, the Iron Islanders still had a complete army intact. 6 years after the sacking of King's Landing and the death of Aerys Targaryen II, Lord Balon Greyjoy declared himself King of the Iron Islands, and that the Iron Islands would be their own separate kingdom. He did this, as many of the other lords still referred to Robert as the Usurper. Balon thought that he could take advantage of this. The lords who had western lands, including the Starks, the Lannisters, and the Tullys, began to rally their bannermen. In return, Balon ordered a surprise attack on Lannisport, where the Lannisters' fleet was at anchor. Led by Balon's brothers, Victoran and Euron, the entire Lannister fleet burnt in harbour, and it's said that Victoran threw the first torch into Lord Tywin Lannister's flagship. With the destruction of the Lannister fleet, it gave the Ironborn complete dominion over the Sunset Sea, where they pillaged the western coast unopposed, including an assault on Seaguard, a large town built long ago to resist ironborn reavers. The raid was unsuccessful, and Balon's eldest son, Roderick Greyjoy, was slain by Jason Mallister under the walls of Seaguard. With Robert's greater resources, he gathered his brother Stannis, the master of ships, and Paxter Redwine, and managed to smash the Iron Fleet at the Battle of the Fair Isles, which gave Robert's forces power over the sea. It also separated the Iron Islands from the rest of Westeros, ending the Iron Islands raids. At this point, Balon saw his defeat was imminent, and prepared the Iron Islands' defence. When the Crown attacked the Iron Islands, Stannis subdued the largest island, Great Wick, and the head of the Kingsguard, Sir Barristan Selmy, took Old Wick. The main island of Pike and its fortress was attacked by Robert and his old friend, Eddard Stark. They destroyed the towns around Pike before moving to the castle itself. Aided by siege engines, they destroyed the watchtowers and many parts of the walls, burying Maron Greyjoy, Balon's second son. The first to enter the breach in the castle was Thoros of Myr, wielding his flaming sword, followed closely by Jorah Mormont, who earned his knighthood in this battle. After hours of brutal combat in the halls of Pike, Balon was forced to bend the knee. Here, Balon was graciously allowed to keep his title and his head for his surrender, but his last remaining son, Theon Greyjoy, was taken by Ned Stark to ensure Balon's loyalty. Ned Stark offered to take Theon to make sure that when Theon claimed his title as Lord of the Iron Islands, he would not make the same mistake as his father. A tourney was hosted at Lannisport to celebrate Robert's victory, which is basically a huge jousting tournament with feasts. The castle of Pike was severely damaged after the war, as was much of the Iron Islands, and, with his son being captured and put into the care of the Starks, Balon found himself the laughingstock of the great houses. Few would guess that only years later, in the War of Five Kings, he would again declare himself King of Salt and Rock, but this time he risks his entire bloodline.